Good afternoon and welcome to Pack Print Plus Philippines VX, the country's first virtual event for the packaging, printing, and plastics industries. Before we proceed, let us be reminded of the following house rules. There will be a Q&A portion at the end of the presentation. You may ask your questions using the chat box and send your questions to all panelists. It's possible that not all questions will be answered live, but we will email the list of questions and answers to all attendees after the webinar. To start the program, let us have for the welcome remarks the President of the Philippine Center for Print Excellence Foundation Incorporated. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm round of applause please for Mr. Richard Ong.
Hello, good afternoon. Hope you're having a good day. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for participating in our webinar programs with the theme Business Survival Programs in the New Normal. Today, we are really excited and looking forward to the knowledge that we will be gaining from our speakers from our government, namely the Department of Labor, Bureau of Internal Revenue, Metro Manila Development Authority, and of course, the relevant industry association, Procurement and Supply Institute of Asia, PASIA. Thank you very much to all our speakers. As the pandemic has greatly affected lots of businesses, we believe that these sets of webinars that we prepared for you is going to be beneficial to everyone, especially to the business owners. These webinars will guide and update us in the current plans and guidelines that will help us cope in the changing business environment, or what we call the new normal. Hope that these webinars will be worthwhile for everyone. Lastly, don't forget to visit the virtual booth of the exhibition hall. Aside from having a glimpse of the product offerings, you may also set meeting with the exhibitors through our virtual business-to-business matching meeting. May everyone will have fruitful and productive afternoon. Again, thank you very much, and let's all stay safe always. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richard Ong. Our speaker for this session will talk about initiatives in preserving businesses and its employees. With us is the Assistant Secretary and Concurrent Director 4 of the Regional Operations, Labor Standards, and Special Concerns Cluster of the Department of Labor and Employment. Let us welcome to the virtual stage, Dr. Maria Teresita S. Cucueco.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting the DOLE to this webinar series of that you have developed and that you are hosting. And definitely the DOLE would like to share with you very important issuances that was brought out because of COVID. Do you think we can start already? Can I share my screen and we can start the presentation? When COVID started, the DOLE DTI, of course, under the directive of the IATF, was asked to provide guidelines for workplaces so that they can, as you resume business, then there would be that safe and healthy place in the workplace where workers are going to go back to work. We know that COVID up to now is still present. We do not have a cure nor a vaccine, but we have to live with COVID, but we can protect ourselves. And that is the message we bring, that we can continue to work, but there are the public health standards that should be applied in the workplaces, which means that, of course, the workplace must then comply with these minimum public health standards that have been aligned to the workplace. So since the beginning, after the ECQ has been lifted, the DOLE DTI has already brought out the first interim guidelines, and in August we brought out this second supplemental guidelines, again because 8 months into the pandemic we knew that there were still more details that we had to address, and because of course the cases were still there. So to move forward, this is the supplemental guidelines that have been issued. This is really taking off from the first interim guidelines, where in the first interim we looked at the first part, and you see that on your screen, and we really addressed the need to look at the first for ABCD on letting the workers, so letting our, of course, the whole, everyone in the workplace have that safe workplace, and of course look at themselves, and that they can they will be resistant, or they physically and mentally they can be responding to the challenges of COVID. So we already gave the details on increasing physical and mental resilience. We also gave details on how to reduce transmission of COVID-19, reducing contact, reducing duration of infection. And following this is the additional to the supplemental guidelines, the management of symptomatic individuals at work, safety and health, more safety and health details, as we have to address this in all workplaces. Definitely the notification and reporting, because these are part of compliances by the labor code and the safety and health standards. And then we have the disinfection and closure. And here I will have to highlight the clarificatory advisory that the DTI and DOLE gave out. I think it does in September. It wasn't last month. And of course, what is very much needed also by those who are affected, the leaves, absences, and entitlements. So what is the difference between the first interim guidelines and this one on increasing physical and mental resilience? It's not a difference we just added on. Definitely, we still will promote and advocate proper nutrition, getting good sleep. But here, 8 months into the disease, and that was in August, we saw the challenges of mental health. And that is why here we already wrote down specific numbers that workers, employers can contact should they need assistance because of the mental health challenges, the conditions, the concerns that were arising from the workers. The fear, the anxiety, it's not the workers, all of us, myself included, we really had so much fear. We up to now, the fear and the anxiety as we face this pandemic. Now, on reducing transmission, it was already part of the first guidelines where masks is it's a minimum public health standard, so everybody has to comply with that. Again, in the supplemental, we still the use of mask is still should be followed. It should be complied with, and you can still use both the disposable, the surgical mask, and even the cloth masks. Face shields now is part of the new supplemental guidelines. This is an additional barrier, but we are telling workers to use this, especially when there is interaction. However, please understand that it may be that these face shields may be removed according to the demands of the work. If there will be difficulty in doing your work because of the face shield, meaning to say, even if working with computers and the face shield will be very distracting, you can take it off. Or when you have to enter, and this is the semiconductor, we talk of the print plastic, when there is manufacturing and the face shields will hamper visibility, then it should be taken off. However, once there will be interaction with colleagues, with the clients, with publics, then the face shield should be worn. And this is also a requirement in the public transport. The physical distancing is another minimum public health standard that should still be followed. 1 meter would be the minimum distance. More than that, of course, would be better. And the frequent disinfection. We cannot overemphasize that together with other minimum public health standards, the best way of eliminating COVID or any germs that would come into contact with our hands then can be transmitted inside our bodies through touching of our mouth, our nose, and our eyes. It will be eliminated if we frequently wash our hands and frequently disinfect using alcohol-based sanitizers. There was just to tell you, there was a survey that was done by the DOH after our first interim guidelines, and we saw that there were really behaviors and practices in the workplace that need to be strengthened. And one of this was hand washing, because they would say yes, they frequently would sanitize or wash their hands, but when you ask how many times, then they would say it was be twice before they enter, before they go home. That is not really the optimal or the frequent disinfection that we are asking for, because anytime and once you touch any contaminated surface, then the hands should be disinfected, and that is why there is frequent disinfection. And this is the reason we are always telling our employers now, please have all of this signages, reminders in the workplaces, post it, not just in the entrance, but where workers converge, in canteens, in conference areas, so that they will be reminded of behaviors and practices that they should follow to protect themselves. When they protect themselves, they protect their families, and ultimately, they will be preventing COVID from going into, to cause a disease in their family as well. And to add to this, visual signages would be awareness raising. We ask companies, please put all, have webinars, have online sessions. If not, put all this information in your website, but this information should be validated, information from reliable sources. Otherwise, our workers will get information, and there are many of this from Facebook, and many of these are fake news, which will just drive up anxiety and fear. And this is not what we want. The DOH website has already so much information, so with the WHO and other international reliable sources of information. We are now looking at, of course, reducing transmission through ventilation. Lately, there was now an issue on the airborne transmission of COVID, meaning to say if it lingers in the air, then it can infect, if someone will go through an area where someone just sneezed or coughed, and there would be this aerosol with COVID in that air, in that space, it can be a source of transmission. So if there is adequate ventilation, you will dilute the air, and that means that those germs, whether COVID or not, are also brought out away from that work area and brought out into the environment, and it will be diluted in a sense that the concentration is not so much that would cause a disease. So really, we're looking now at adequate ventilation, meaning open your doors, open your windows. If this is not possible, I remember this is manufacturing, your companies here, then have those air exchange mechanisms that are present, that your safety engineers would know, have the HEPA filters present. It is not, we have no standard ventilation mechanisms. We really rely on what your safety officers would say, but what is important is that there is that air exchange, clean air going in and contaminated air going out. This is also true for shuttle services, where we have this from office spaces to shuttles. These are enclosed areas, and like we said, if there is a COVID transmission there, it is best that it's brought out, and that the best way to bring this out would really be having those ventilation present in office spaces and even in the shuttle. Because it might really be difficult in shuttle services, although here we advocate opening the windows. But if it is raining, that has been asked of us, then that is the reason why you will see later in the clarificatory, and this is also part of the supplemental, we have strict rules that there should be no talking, no eating, and using of the face mask and face shield. Again, this is to eliminate the transmission and to have and all those who are inside these workplaces to be properly protected. Reducing contact also looks at mass gathering, meaning where there would be more people in any area, and look at office spaces. These are enclosed areas, so the risk will always be high. And that is why we're saying limit the number of people in, if you have meetings, limit the number of people in a meeting. Who are those who should only be present? And of course, the physical distancing, the use of the face mask, the face shield, all of these parameters should still be there. This is a requirement, and really limit the people. If you need more people, Video teleconferencing has always worked, and this is the reason why Zoom meetings are always present, and not just Zoom, many other platforms are present. And these are where meetings can take place if you need more people, and it would be a lengthier type of meeting. Canteens and other dining areas, including, kasi you're not going to see it here, that's why my call here is please look at the supplemental guidelines in whole. You can have that in the DOLE website, in the BWC website, the DTI website, but we're looking here at canteens as an area where people would gather, and that is again the reason why we are asking that canteens should have the observe the minimum public health standards, the distancing, even adding the protective barriers. But of course, when you eat, you take off your face mask and face shield because you're eating. And that is why when you eat, we really discourage talking, because once it's out, secretions can be spread, and that is where transmission may happen. So once you've eaten, with the supplemental guidelines say, disinfect the area, wear your face mask, wear your face shield, wash your hands, then go back to your work area. Because canteens, locker rooms, smoking areas, these are areas where there might be workers who would converge. We're saying limit the number, limit the time spent there so that it will not be, the risk for transmission will also be lessened. The responsibility to carry out all of the safety and health program will really be a big responsibility on the Safety and Health Committee, that should be existing in all workplaces, as well as the safety and health officers who should be implementing all of these. Even the number of people in bathrooms should also be regulated. It's because, when you go to the bathroom, you will be taking off your face mask and face shield to wash or to brush your teeth. Of course, to wash your hands, you do not need to remove that. But when you start brushing and then again, because of that, because the masks are off and the secretions are out, just limit. And that's why for the safety officers, we're telling them, please limit the number of people inside these areas, canteens, locker rooms, smoking areas, even bathrooms. Looking at infection, definitely we have to understand that we do not it is best that those or our employees who are not feeling well should not report for work. And that is why we have the health declaration form. As a reminder, this has to be accomplished daily because there are exposures there. You have the temperature check there, and of course your information. The reason here is that if you don't have any of these COVID-related symptoms, then you should consult first and not go to work, so that you will not bring about a risk of transmission. If it is not COVID, then fine, at least teleconsult or call your healthcare provider so that you can find out, so that you can say first, what you should be doing. But it is really not letting you expose yourself to your co-workers, and even in the house. And once you start feeling unwell, it is best that you isolate yourself so that you will not also expose yourself to other family members and they might get sick. Whether it's COVID or not, really, you do not like anyone you would not like to transmit any disease to your family or your co-workers. That's why that health declaration form is very important, and it should be done daily. It's not important that it will be done manually. You can do it online. Many companies have been doing this, so we leave that up to you. Contact tracing of visitors and customers are also needed, especially because if you go to restaurants, to malls, or to areas where they allow customers to come in. If somebody tests positive and you are present and you need to be contact traced, at least you will be given that information. You can observe yourself so that you can also take the proper measures. And here we, of course, advocate the use of teleconsult. If you do not feel well, do not go to the clinic, because that's what we're saying. Do not present yourself physically, but rather please call. And that's why we're asking all employers now to have a teleconsult type of referral. And you might ask for micro. If that's going to happen, and of course we know that micro businesses might not have this kind of a program nor this kind of a mechanism, then they should already go to the barangay health center, or these barangay health centers would already have telephone numbers that they can contact. And that is, of course, looking again um, at a manner, or um, in a manner where we are remotely managing all of these, whether they're COVID cases or not yet COVID cases or with other symptoms. It should really be remotely managed through telemedicine and teleconsult. Once you have a COVID uh, case in any workplace, it is very important, of course, that they be treated, that they be managed properly. But also, as equally important, would be contact tracing, because those who have been exposed to this case should uh, observe themselves or have themselves tested, if that is going to be a requirement of the physician or the contact tracing team, so that they, you will be able to isolate the disease and reduce the risk of transmission. What is very, very important really in addressing COVID is that those who are sick or those who may be exposed also isolate themselves, so that they will not further the risk of transmission. So who are close contacts? This is very important. Not everyone is a close contact. That's why your risk of an infection after being exposed will only happen if you're a close contact. That means you have a face-to-face contact with a confirmed case within 1 meter, meaning 1 meter or less, for more than 15 minutes, you with or without a mask, or there is direct physical contact with a confirmed case, or you have been giving direct care for a patient with a probable or confirmed COVID-19 case without any PPE. If you belong to any of this category, you're a close contact, and you should be then quarantined. Now, if there is a confirmed case, he will have to identify his close contacts, especially 2 days before any of the symptoms, and of course following that, when the last time he would have reported to work. But if he cannot recall, then the use of CCTVs would be very helpful. Now, close contacts, once are already identified as close contacts, they should go on a 14-day quarantine period. Should they be tested or not, we leave that up to them. Not to them, we leave it up to the contact tracing team. But this is important. If a close contact will develop symptoms, they should be tested right away. But again, it will depend on now who should be tested. If the tests are available, that would be good. But please remember, even if you test negative and you're a close contact, you should still complete the 14-day quarantine. After the 14-day quarantine, then you can now report for work. But it is very important that you should complete that 14-day quarantine, whether or not your test is negative, or of course positive means you really have to go on a full 14-day quarantine, but negative would still mean you will still continue on that full 14-day quarantine. And during that 14-day quarantine, it should be done that you regularly check on symptoms. If your company is a program that they would contact you, please do so, because this would be your daily journal, and because you are a close contact, you have already been identified to the local barangay health center, and before you go back, you have to provide that certificate that you have completed your 14-day quarantine. On testing, we would like you to look at the DOH memo circular on the expanded strategy on testing, which is DOH memo 258 and 258, which provides that yes, there are those who can be tested and that this can be reimbursed. So employers will, once you're tested, that is already reimbursed by PhilHealth. But if you need to be regularly tested, because it's part of the monitoring of workforces that have been identified by the DOH, then it can be done, and this can also be reimbursed with PhilHealth. So please look at the DOH memo circular 258 and 258-A. We are considering priority workers for this type of regular testing maybe, and this is not mandatory, this is still, you may look at this if you would like to have your workers tested with a regularity. And this would be employees in the hospitality and tourism sectors. These are the areas mentioned, and they may be tested once every 4 weeks. Now, going to the next priority sector workers, you have to understand that we have to you will see a special, you will see an item that talks of special concern areas that you have to identify, and they can then be regularly tested. So when you see the note of special concern areas, it refers to an area with high prevalence of COVID cases, or if it's not with high prevalence, there is clustering of households or 2 or more households in a barangay with COVID in a period of 2 weeks. And these special concerned areas have also been identified as a special concern area by the National Task Force. So here we are now talking of testing for all manufacturing companies and public service providers. So understand, it's not all employees. We're talking now of manufacturing companies and their workers who are public service providers in economic zone within a special concern area, and they may be tested once every quarter. For other priority sector workers, and this is what I was mentioning that has been identified in the DOH memo, we are now looking at these workers in the following. I will show this to you in the next few slides, but remember again, you are looking at high priority sectors. This is the list that I will be showing. High interaction and exposure to the public. So it's not everyone in the workplaces that may be regularly tested, and of course, they should be in that special concern area. And if it fits all 3 categories, they may be tested once every quarter. So you would have workers in transport and logistics. So this would be workers in, these are the drivers of taxis, those on the motorcycles, buses, public transport vehicles, conductors, pilots, rail operators. You see the list po. Then you also have those in food retail, the waiters, the waitresses, the bartenders, education, the teachers, bank tellers in financial services, cashiers, stock clerks in non-food, market vendors, in services, meaning to say your hairdressers, barbers, manicurists, even the embalmers, morticians, parking lot attendants, security guards, messengers. You see, you continue even to the clergy, construction workers, the carpenters, the stonemasons, electricians, painters, even the engineers, the operators, the crane and tower operators, even elevator installers and repairers, for those doing water supply, sewerage, and waste management, those in the public sector, and those in the mass media. So these are the line list of the priority workers who may be regularly tested and whose testing may be reimbursed by PhilHealth. On testing, it is very important that those close contacts and who now have symptoms must have that RT-PCR. This is the only time that you will see a mandatory RT-PCR testing. In the whole supplemental guidelines, if you talk of testing, this refers to the RT-PCR. Now, if you are a symptomatic employee and you have a travel or exposure to COVID-19, you of course have to be tested, because that was the previous slide. Because you now have symptoms, you will be tested. After symptoms, the latest DOH memo says 3 days after symptoms, you can now go, if you were in a hospital or you were in, if you had mild symptoms, you were in a temporary treatment facility, you can be discharged, but you still need to continue with that 14-day quarantine. Workers previously symptomatic shall undergo a 14-day quarantine. If there's no new symptoms, workers can then resume work without need for further testing. It is true. Once you test positive, you do not need a second test. This is because many times it has already been shown that after 14 days, you still might get tested positive, but that is not your infectious virus anymore. These are viral residues, which means to say you are not infective, and you are well, you are recovered. So this has been shown that there are these kinds, they're not carriers. It just so happens that it takes a long time for the viral residues to be, to disappear. So if you keep on relying on tests, and sometimes it can take up to a month of positive tests, these workers cannot go to work. And that is so, and it is difficult for this kind of workers not to be able to go back to work. RT-PCR or any antibody-based tests are not recommended nor required for asymptomatic employees returning to work. Now you have heard of the antigen test, even that it is not recommended. If you're an asymptomatic employee, you have no close contact, you have no travel, it is not required that you have any of these tests. And that is why it is also very important that that health declaration form should be answered daily. Now, reporting of the COVID-19 test results should be done. It should, if it is for the workplace, it should be given to the local government unit where your workplace is situated, and to the residence of the worker where he is residing at the present. So if he's in a boarding house, then it should also the test result should also be given to the barangay of his boarding house, not necessarily anymore to his place of residence, just to his place of residence where he is most often staying in. On leaves of absence and entitlements, this shall be governed by the pertinent rules. All workers would have a sick leave, a vacation. Once sick leave is finished, then it's now their option to use any other leaves, their vacation leaves or whatever leaves they are present. We have heard other companies already having, quarantine leaves, calamity leaves. That is a very good practice, but it is so difficult now when there is no leave and sometimes there is no pay, because that makes it all the more very challenging for workers who now have to quarantine, and then they have no pay because they do have to provide for their family. And that is why we are really looking at the generosity of the employers to provide. Now, if you're positive, there are, of course, the benefits from PhilHealth, the SSS, as well as the EC, the Employees Compensation Commission, if it is a work-related disease. GSIS, if you are a government sector as well. Because of the cost of COVID, we are also asking employers to provide, of course, the leave benefits, additional leave benefits, especially for those who have to quarantine themselves. If you test negative, but you still continue quarantine, those leaves are so important, because this is where you will be obtaining the income these workers need. We also ask employers to increase medical coverage, because we see now that the expenses from COVID can run up to the millions. And we also, again, this supplemental pay allowance, especially for those who go on quarantine. Just to give you now a briefer on the advisories that were issued by the DOLE on shuttle services. This is the new issuance. If you are a large size private establishment of assets of more than 100 million inside the special economic zone, you are required to provide shuttle services for the employees. However, if you are now unable to financially sustain these shuttle services, you can then have such cost-sharing agreements with your workers. On the practices inside shuttle services, I already mentioned them. Minimum public health standards should still be strictly enforced. And for most at-risk employees, meaning those of 60 years and older and 21 year younger, and those below 21 years of age, they are now allowed to report to work for 8 hours, provided that they undergo a fit-to-work examination and secure a medical certificate. And of course, certifying the employee's fitness to work. So because of that clamor where there's now, it became almost very discriminatory for older workers, because they were saying they are now being retrenched. If they are medically fit, they can go back to work. But still, we still encourage that, they work from home if these kinds of arrangements can be done. Isolation areas, this is required in supplemental guidance. We further clarify that these isolation areas of 1 room for every 200 employees is going to be based on the number of employees reporting per shift. So if you have 2,000 workers total, and and in a shift you would have 1,000, you would just need 5 isolation areas. The reason for these isolation areas would be to isolate these workers who cannot isolate themselves at home and who are not, you're already feeling unwell, and might be have the risk of infecting their family members. So this is an arrangement that employers can now provide for their workers. It can be, one put up by the company, or it can be an arrangement done by the company. What is important is that if there's this arrangement, it should be within the control of the employer, meaning to say it's available when necessary. We refer here to hotels or boarding houses that you may use as your isolation area. Now, this is different from a holding area, which is required if you have visitors who check your health declaration and have answered a yes to any of the symptoms, or might have an elevated temperature. That temporary holding or isolation area is there so that you can separate them. They do not have to, they will not enter your workplace, but they will be assessed and see if, it is really a cause for to let them be further be assessed medically. Now, establishments may make arrangements with a temporary treatment and monitoring facility. Almost all barangays now have these TTMFs, and that would be, and you can have that also as your arrangement for your isolation area for your employees. On disinfection, this has been a big issue. What we're saying now is, please, employers, have a company policy on the temporary closure for disinfection and, of course, contact tracing. And you can only close specific areas, floors, or units where you find a COVID case. You do not have to close the entire building. So it's just, you can just really disinfect that particular area, but please have the necessary disinfection guidelines for this, because it is also very important that you will maintain the safety of those unaffected employees, because you're allowing continuity of operations in other areas. But of course, you have, and they will be working when there are other areas being disinfected. That's why it's very important that their safety and health is also ascertained and ensured of. That shorter lockdown may be, of course, less than 24 hours. We have also heard that it can be as short as 3 to 4 hours, as long as the safety of the employees now who go back to this area is ascertained. In this clarificatory, we also provided that for malls, there should still be a suitable work environment, looking at air conditioning, temperatures, and to be set at least at to 24 degrees centigrade for comfort. This has been the previous disinfection. This has now been changed to the clarificatory guidelines I mentioned earlier. Having said that, again, thank you so much for inviting the DOLE. We hope we have shared with you the importance of preventing and protecting ourselves from COVID-19. The workplace is definitely one of the areas we will have to always go to every day, but it is very important that these workplaces should be safe and healthy, and that we feel safe even when we have to go to these workplaces. Again, thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maria Teresita S. Cucueco. Kindly stay with us for the Q&A session, but before we proceed, here again are the house rules. There will be a Q&A portion at the end of the presentation. You may ask your questions using the chat box and send your questions to all panelists. It's possible that not all questions will be answered live, but we will email the list of questions and answers to all attendees after the webinar. We will now proceed with the Q&A session.
I'll just read from the chat box so that
Okay.
What is the, I think, the most often not complied with, the health standard protocol not observed? Yes, our labor inspectors have already gone and inspected more than 45,000 companies, and those that we see are the health declaration form, and because even reporting is part of this, which is the COVID work accident illness reporting form, the WAIR. These also have been one of the protocols that have not been mostly complied with. But once we point that out, I know the companies do comply. Now, if we look at really observing what is done in the workplace and not complied with, that is the like I mentioned earlier, the health declaration form that some companies do not even ask to be answered. So that is very, very important.
Okay, thank you. Asek, any more question to the participant?
I shared with you po our slide deck. You can share it with them po. It's fine with the DOLE.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Asek.
Yung last na lang po before I know you have regarding employees who were laid off from companies due to the cost cutting. Yes, how will you manage their situation? You know, actually, what we tell employers is, first, let me ano lang. The DOLE issued a labor advisory 17 and 17A, that it tries to preserve employment. Meaning to say, we are still looking at reducing work hours. It's not that we are reducing minimum wage. We're reducing hours because when you reduce work hours, you will be prorated. But it is also asking your workers, you can still continue to work, pero reduced work hours lang. Everybody has been hit. All employers, I know they have all been hit, and that is why we were looking at flexible work arrangements for workers, for employers to still preserve employment. But for those that really had, of course, who were retrenched, and it has happened, there was, for the DOLE, we tried to give everyone, but not everyone received the COVID assistance measure, which was the 5,000. In the new Bayanihan, there will be another set of that. We will continue, the DOLE will continue addressing this, because we know the workers are affected. There are workers who have really been severely affected. So there is the camp, there are the livelihood programs that the DOLE has also been implementing.
Okay. Thank you, Asek Teresita, for the seminar that you gave to us. Webinar. Thank you.
Okay na. But
So, yes.
There's this one here. Can
Okay,
we just,
sige.
kasi now,
Yeah, okay lang.
sumusunod-sunod.
Sige.
Kasi,
So, last na yan.
This one,
Yeah.
and then isabay ko na, kasi can a
Apo.
company hold its employees inside the premises and not let them go home for fear? Wag naman. You know, hindi ho, they have, what we see is the number 2. For employees who don't want to go back to work, that is what we see. And but if you have already complied, this is where we also always tell all the employees, if the companies have complied with all these minimum public health standards, we really cannot predict who will get, but we are trying. If you're doing everything to protect your workers, to protect everyone, and there is the need to go back to work, then have a company policy on this already. Then everybody, the due process will have to follow.
Okay.
I will just answer the rest lang. Please email na lang po.
Okay.
We can answer that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Asek Teresita.
Thank you din po. And congratulations.
Thank you, Asek.
Successful conference and webinar.
Thank you, Asek. Sir Richard, can you close?
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Due to the time that has given to us to this, we will be ending the question and answer session. But don't worry, we will email the list of question and answer to all attendees after the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you po. I will have to leave. Thank you and congratulations.
Yes, thank you, Asek Teresita.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
The Bureau of Internal Revenue happening in 30 minutes. Stay tuned.